motorcycle enthusiast, Jedz here, and today we're going to be doing a brake fluid replacement on the 2005 Yamaha FZ6 $1,500 bike budget build-off. The project's just about all finished up here. I'm just going through some final things, probably got maybe a few more episodes left. But today I wanted to go over something that should be done pretty much every year, is swapping out your brake fluid. Most manufacturers recommend every 2 years, regardless of miles, you change out your brake fluid. I usually do it once a year just because I ride a lot, and I ride a lot in the rain. And brake fluid is kind of designed to absorb moisture. Fluid technically draws the moisture out, needs to be replaced. You know if it's bad if your brake fluid is black and not a clear. So we're going to go do this today. I also bought today just a run-of-the-mill pump that you can get on eBay. These guys are pretty inexpensive. They are essential tools, especially if you do a lot of your own work. I find these to be pinnacle in brake fluid changes, hydraulic clutch change fluid changes. They're also great for getting stuff out of hard-to-reach areas. You saw I used my old one to pull out some of the coolant from the coolant reservoir. Instead of having to remove the reservoir out and dump it out, I can just go in there and pump it out. Also, for small engines, this is a great tool to have. If there's no drain plug, or the drain plug's really hard to get to, especially like lawnmowers, you can just use your vacuum pump and just kind of pull out all that oil from the sump and then replace it. So it's a really cool tool to have if you're, say, a tree mechanic, I guess you could say. These are kind of an essential tool, and they're not very expensive to get into. So we're going to use one of the base model vacuum pumps. We're going to go do the hydraulic brake fluid on this bike, and we'll see how it goes. So let's dive into it. Alright, so doing the brake fluid's a pretty simple task. Really, you just need your vacuum pump, a JIS driver. Remember, this is a special kind of driver. It's not a screwdriver, not a Phillips head screwdriver. It's a JIS driver, and brand new, fresh brake fluid. And I always will recommend, people will recommend that you get a brand new. You start with brand new brake fluid that's never been opened. Now, I have used fluid that has been opened, that's been sitting on the shelf for a few months, and have had no ill effects. However, I'm going to promote folks that if you're going to do your own brake jobs, if you're going to just replace your fluid, just buy a brand new container. This will do the brakes for this bike. I'll probably use them on the other bikes. I got to do the T120. Actually, I got to do the VMAX, actually. And I'll use all this fluid up today. But today, right now we're just going to use this on the FZ6. So be sure to use brand new fluid every time. So the easiest spot to do, first we want to do, so obviously we just redid all this work on the tank here. We don't want to ruin any of this work, so we need to protect the investment. Brake fluid is exceptionally corrosive, so we're going to need to cover this up. I'll just use an old towel. Then you take your JIS driver. I'll get a bin, my little pan. I'm going to use a little pan today because we're not really going to be using a lot, removing a lot of nuts and bolts. So I'll just use a little pan today. And you know what the cool thing about this FZ6, which really makes it a fantastic bargain bike, is that it came with Brembo brakes from the factory. That little B right there is your master cylinder made by Brembo. The front brakes are Brembo. This bike stops very well because it takes a lot of those R6 components, and one being Brembo brakes. The rear's a Nissan. It's not Brembo, but it stops remarkably well for the amount of value it was given, especially back in like 2005 when this bike was new. So let's take this off. We're going to probably see some disgusting stuff. So you got your top, you got your plastic and your rubber seal. And you can see right here, actually you can't see, but there's some crud building up on that. It's pretty cruddy. So what we're going to do is we're going to vacuum this all out, and then we're going to start pulling the fluid through. We don't want to just pull this dirty stuff through. You don't want to compromise your fluid with pulling this debris through. We're going to clean the reservoir out first, and then we're going to add new fluid, and then we'll start pumping it through. Here we go. So we're going to just pump out all this old junk using that vacuum pump. And at this time, you don't want to push that brake lever at all by accident, because then you'll put air in the line, which isn't terribly the worst thing that could happen because you're bleeding the system anyways, but it just makes things so much easier. Suck all that stuff up. We still got some residue in there. As you can tell, that fluid is scuzzy, and we've got some debris that's forming from it. So, you know, it's something you don't want to run through your brake system. And I like to use the brake parts and cleaner for this. Just make sure you wear some eye protection. This stuff blows all over the place and can hurt your eyes. So, just use a little bit here to free up some of the gunk. And you know, not every year you're going to have to do this, but this bike's been sitting for quite a long time. So I'm just going to go a little overboard and just make sure we're cleaning everything up.
So that master looks brand new. I'm taking all this build up off the walls here. If you have any kind of skin irritation to chemicals, you probably shouldn't use your bare hands. Just so you know. But I'm fine. You're really good in there now. Look at that. There's some corrosion on the aluminum. Oh, that looks pretty good.
And then just use our brake for vacuum. Suck it all up. And this is all evaporative, so we're just going to let this sit for a little bit and let the remaining brake cleaner evaporate up. Fill it right up with brake fluid. Look how clean that is. It's all clear. So now we will move to a caliper, bleed out all the fluid. Alright, so now we're on the calipers. So it's actually pretty easy. You don't have to take the calipers off, but you do have to locate your bleeder valve. And sometimes these things are pretty corroded, so they may not just pull fluid right away. Generally, I've found they're 8mm, or sometimes they're 10mm. So you actually get a little 8mm wrench. And these are like hand tight, guys. You don't want to crank them. So just give them a nice little snap. That'll loosen it up. You might see some fluid come out. If no fluid comes out, that means your bleeder's probably stuck a little bit, because the gravity's going to push the fluid down anyways. So I'm just going to pull out and see what's going on in here. And there might be just a lot of particulates in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull the vacuum on this and hopefully pull out most of this stuff. It's good to just double check to make sure there's no physical obstructions. There's a lot of oxidizing materials, such as your aluminum or steel, if there's steel lines, that could build up inside of the bleeder and block it. So just want to make sure that you can pull a good vacuum. So I use a fuel line for brake fluid, just because the plastic line that comes with the brake kits, or the brake bleeder kits or the vacuum kits, they do an okay job, but after a few times they are pretty corroded and they are pretty worthless. So found the hose works the best. Now there's a real trick to this, because you know none of this stuff wants to stay in, so you kind of have to like angle it around so that you're not pulling but creating pressure. So we're loose. Hook up to the vacuum. So we've got the new vacuum. Got your collector down there. You start pulling. I like to do about a reservoir's worth of fluid per caliper. Allows you to get all that debris out. Now we're flowing pretty well. Then with the vacuum, get in there. Make sure your vacuum you're under vacuum when you do this. And hand tight. Get that little noise. You dump. Cap. Just do another. Make sure it's nice and snug. Yep, we're good. Cap it. Done. Do the next set. Alright, so the rear brake, you would think was easier because it's only one caliper, but it's kind of tricky, especially on this bike, because the master and the reservoir are up here. So here's your master. here's your caliper. Here is your reservoir. So it's all under the tank. So I've already popped the seat. Take the seat off. As you can tell right here, this little wiggly bit right here, that's your master. So, or that's your reservoir, I'm sorry. So use your fingers and do some finger gymnastics. And, oh, there she goes. There she goes. Like I said, this one, no fun. And there's the big rubber boot. Makes it almost nearly impossible to get out. But with finagling, you got your cap off. And there's your reservoir. Very dirty. So, pump this out. And it is just bad, and there's actually a piece of something floating in there. Got the rear caliper here, as you can tell. Little bleeder. Looks like another 8mm. Of course, we're going to put fluid right in the top. And we're going to crack this open. And I'm seeing a lot of corrosion inside that bleeder. So I'm going to take it off. It's going to bleed out. But yep, the bleeder itself is completely corroded. So I'm just going to clean it out a little bit. Put those safety glasses on. As you can tell, we got a good gravity feed going through right now. You can actually bleed the brakes this way too. Just takes forever. I'm not doing that. So, give it a little twist. Put on. And keep an eye on that master. On that reservoir, I'm sorry. I'm going to do about 2 or 3. I'm going to take this. Okay. I'm just going to empty this out, but as you can tell, it is scuzzy, and there is a lot of particulates in there. Okay, now I'm adding fluid as I'm doing this, but I think we got what we need. Make sure that's tight. We got good brake feel. Make sure we're good. Nice and snug, but not too snug. All done. I wanted to go to show like what comes out of brake fluid systems. If you haven't done them in forever, as you can see, look at the particulates here. This is all came out of this rear and front brake system of this FZ6. I did my best to flush out as much as I can. I still got a full container worth of clean reservoir for the rear I got to put in. The rear really darkened this up. This wasn't nearly as bad until I started doing the rear brake. It's so imperative, guys. All that kind of oxidizing material, you don't want floating around. It's going to affect the boiling rate. It's going to affect allowing the fluid to cool down correctly. You just need to get rid of it and make sure you do it often. And actually, there's a little bit of a tinge of water in here. As you can tell, it's a little separated. It's got these lines in it, like you would see in like in a glass of wine. That that relates to different gravities of the solution. So it's not even the same gravity, which it should all be consistent. So really important that you do your brake fluid at least twice a year. I say do it every year if you're a rider like I am, and you ride in the winter and you ride in the rain. So it's always important that you do your brake fluid. It's a critical component, guys. If you're doing oil changes on your bikes, you need to do your brake fluid. It's part of the fluid regimen. Just as important as radiator fluid. If anything, it's more important because the radiator will cause the bike to overheat. It's not going to run right. But if your brakes fail on you, you're not stopping. You're done. So really, really, really important to kind of just make sure you add this to your regimen. I say do it annually. Just make sure it's done, especially if you ride in the rain, because that's what causes the moisture to get into the fluid is all the rain exposure. So just make sure you take care of those fluids, guys, because these are critical. So anyways, this wraps up this episode. If you like what you see, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to keep doing some of these videos, see what's coming up next. I think I could figure out maybe a couple more how-tos for you guys. If you like what you see or you want to know how to do something, why don't you just put it in the comment section below, send me an email. I'd be more than happy to respond and, talk it out, and maybe I'll make a video of something that you want to see, some kind of maintenance procedure. Right now, this bike's pretty much done, so not much left to do. We will keep plugging away, but there's not much left to do, guys. I really can't think of anything else left to do. Bike's all set. So maybe I'll put some side racks on or something, but it won't be part of the $1,500 build. So I'm going to say this one really wraps up the $1,500 budget bike build off. You can get into a nice, competent, beautiful, fuel-injected motorcycle for less than $1,500 total cost. It's not that hard to do. It's just being patient, looking at the market, and finding a good deal. There's always one presents itself. You just got to look hard enough to find it. Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I will be out on the road, or maybe I won't, but if you guys are out riding, make sure you're out there and you're riding safe and keep it shiny side up out there. Thanks.